The day my sister-in-law faked a miscarriage at my wife's baby shower, I already had the receipts in my jacket pocket. I had been carrying them for 3 weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story does not start with a dramatic scene or a screaming match. It starts with something much quieter. It starts with a blue gift bag sitting on our kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in late October, and the way my wife Maya looked at it like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be happy. Maya was 26 weeks pregnant. We had tried for 2 years to get to that point. 2 years of early mornings and late nights and appointments that I drove her to in silence because there was nothing useful to say. 2 years of watching her hold herself together with a kind of dignity I genuinely could not have matched. When the pregnancy finally held, when the weeks ticked past the first trimester, and then the second, and the doctors started using words like healthy and on track, we both exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. We weren't loud about our joy. We told family. We made plans. We bought a crib that took me 4 hours to assemble because the instructions were illustrated by someone who had apparently never seen furniture before. We painted the spare room a soft sage green that Maya had picked out from a swatch card she had been carrying in her wallet for months. Small things, careful things, the kind of happiness you hold gently because you know what it cost. My sister-in-law Carla had been a fixture in our lives for as long as I had known Maya. She was 3 years older than Maya, louder by about 100 decibels, and had a talent for making every room feel like it had been rearranged to face her. She wasn't cruel in the obvious way. She didn't say mean things directly. She operated on a different frequency, the kind of subtle redirection that left you wondering afterward whether something had actually happened, or whether you had imagined it. When Maya and I got married, Carla had a stomach bug the week before and needed everyone to rearrange the rehearsal dinner seating so she could be near the door. When Maya got promoted at work, Carla called the same night to tell the family she was thinking about going back to school for a second degree, something she had apparently been sitting on for months, but chose that particular evening to announce. When we told the family about the pregnancy, Carla hugged Maya and said all the right words, but I watched her eyes while she said them. They were doing something else entirely. I want to be fair here. I told myself for years that I was being uncharitable, that Carla was just a big personality and I was reading too much into things. Maya loved her sister. That mattered to me. So I kept my observations to myself and I stayed polite, and I handed Carla a glass of wine at family dinners and I smiled at her stories. Then came November. It was a Sunday. We were at Maya's parents' house for a regular family lunch, the kind we did once a month. Nothing special. Carla arrived late, which was normal, but she arrived looking different. She came in through the front door with her coat still on and her hand pressed flat against her stomach and her eyes doing that particular thing where they were wet, but not quite crying, hovering right at the edge of it. Maya's mother was on her feet immediately. "What's wrong? What happened?" Carla sat down slowly, like the chair required negotiation. She said she had some news. She said she had been keeping it to herself because she wasn't sure how to say it. She said she was pregnant. The room changed. Maya's mother made a sound I can only describe as a gasp that became a word that became a hug. Maya's father stood up from his chair. People moved toward Carla. The lunch on the table went cold. I watched Maya's face. She smiled. It was a real smile, not a performed one. Maya was genuinely happy for her sister. That was the thing about Maya. She didn't have a competitive bone in her body. She reached across the table and squeezed Carla's hand and said, "That's wonderful," and meant every syllable. I watched Carla receive that warmth, and I watched something flicker in Carla's expression, something quick and satisfied that was gone before anyone else would have caught it. I told myself I was imagining things. Again. But then the weeks started moving in a particular pattern. Every time Maya had an appointment, Carla had a complication. Every time we shared an update about the nursery or the name or the birth plan, Carla appeared the next day with a worry, a symptom, a piece of news that needed attention. It wasn't dramatic. It was calibrated, just enough to redirect the conversation, just enough to remind everyone that there were 2 pregnancies happening and one of them required more care. Maya's mother started calling Carla every morning. The family group chat, which had been cheerful and full of nursery photos and baby name debates, slowly filled with Carla's updates. How she was feeling, what the doctor had said, whether she was sleeping. The nursery photos still got likes, but the conversation moved on faster. I noticed. I didn't say anything yet. Then I started noticing other things. Carla had announced she was 8 weeks pregnant at that Sunday lunch. By late November, she should have been around 12 weeks. I knew this because I had been living inside the world of pregnancy timelines for 2 years, and I knew the milestones the way I knew my own phone number. At 12 weeks, most people had at least had a dating scan. Maybe a nuchal translucency scan. Some kind of image, some kind of confirmation from a clinic. Maya's mother asked Carla about her scan one evening when we were all together. Carla said her clinic had rescheduled twice because of equipment issues. She said it was frustrating. She said she was trying not to stress about it. Maya's mother accepted this completely. I stored it. A few days later, I was at a pharmacy picking up Maya's prenatal vitamins. I ran into Carla's friend Bex, someone I had met a handful of times at family gatherings. Bex was friendly in that slightly uncomfortable way people are when they know something you don't, and they're deciding whether to say it. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. She asked how Maya was doing. I said, well, thank you, getting close now. There was a pause. Bex said, and Carla? How is she holding up with everything? I said Carla seemed fine, as far as I knew. Bex looked at me for a moment too long and then said, right, okay, good, that's good. She left. I stood in the vitamin aisle for a long time. I went home and I thought about that pause. I thought about the look. I thought about Carla's hand pressed flat against her stomach when she walked in the door that Sunday, a gesture I'd seen pregnant women make, but also a gesture that could be performed by someone who had simply practiced it. I thought about the clinic with the equipment issues. I thought about the way Carla had looked when Maya squeezed her hand. I started paying closer attention. Carla had mentioned her clinic by name once, in passing, during a family dinner. I remembered it because it was a clinic I recognized, one that was reasonably well known in the area. A few days after the pharmacy encounter with Bex, I called the clinic. I didn't ask about Carla. I called under the guise of asking about their booking process for new patients. The receptionist was helpful. She told me they were currently booking new patients for appointments starting in the new year, but that their schedule had been fully operational all autumn. No equipment closures, no rescheduling backlog. I thanked her and hung up. I sat with that for a while. That was the first thread pulled clean. I still didn't say anything. Not to Maya. Not yet. Maya was 30 weeks pregnant. She was tired and she was happy, and she was making lists of things we still needed, and she was talking to the baby at night in a quiet voice when she thought I was asleep. I was not going to drop a grenade into that piece without being certain. I needed more. I went back to Bex. I messaged her through a social platform, kept it simple, told her I had noticed something seemed off and that I was trying to understand what was happening before I involved anyone else. I told her I wasn't looking to cause drama. I was looking to protect my wife. Bex replied the same evening. She said she had been struggling with what to do for weeks. She said Carla had told her about the plan in September, before the Sunday lunch announcement, when Carla had been upset about Maya's pregnancy getting all the family attention. Bex said Carla had described it as just buying herself some time and leveling the playing field. Bex said she had assumed Carla would come clean quickly, that it was a moment of impulse that would pass. But it hadn't passed. It had escalated. Bex sent me a screenshot of a conversation between her and Carla from early October. In it, Carla talked about the gifts she had already received from family members who had sent early congratulations packages. She talked about how good it felt to have her mother calling every day again. She used the word finally more than once. I read it twice, then I saved it. That was the second thread. I also, over the following 2 weeks, found a third piece of evidence almost by accident. Carla had left her bag open at Maya's parents' house one evening, and a receipt had slipped out onto the floor near the coat rack. I picked it up to put it back, and I saw what it was before I could stop myself. It was from a costume and theatrical supply shop. The itemized list included a silicone prosthetic belly form, size medium. The date on the receipt was 2 weeks before Carla's announcement Sunday. I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet. 3 threads: the clinic call, the screenshot from Bex, and the receipt. Each one individually explainable. Together, they pointed in only one direction. I understood the plan then. All of it. The fourth piece came from Maya's mother herself, without her realizing it. She mentioned offhandedly one afternoon that Carla had asked her not to throw her a baby shower yet because she wanted to wait until Maya's shower was done first, to give Maya her moment. She said it with a warmth that was meant to show Carla's thoughtfulness. I heard it differently. Carla wasn't being thoughtful. Carla was managing the calendar. She needed Maya's shower to happen first so she could perform her crisis there, at the event with the largest audience, before her own fictional pregnancy needed to produce any further evidence. The shower was the stage she had been building toward since September. I put the receipt in my jacket pocket alongside the printed screenshot Bex had given me permission to use. I had the clinic information in my phone. I had Bex willing to speak if needed. I had 4 separate threads of evidence pointing in the same direction. I waited. Maya's baby shower was scheduled for the second Saturday in December. Maya's mother and 2 of her friends had organised it. It was held in the private function room of a restaurant Maya loved, a warm place with exposed brick walls and low lighting, and small round tables set with white cloths and little glass vases of eucalyptus. About 25 people were there. Family, close friends, people who had watched Maya and me go through the 2 hard years and who were genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy to be celebrating with us. Maya wore a deep burgundy dress. She looked beautiful. She was 33 weeks along, and she was glowing in the specific way that people say as a cliché, but which was, in her case, simply accurate. She sat in the centre of the room and people brought her gifts, and she laughed and she cried a little, and she held tiny folded onesies up for everyone to see, and the room was full of the kind of warmth that you try to hold on to. I stood near the back for most of the first hour. I watched the room. I watched Carla. Carla had arrived in a flowy dress, and she had been gracious for the first 45 minutes. She had hugged Maya. She had admired the decorations. She had laughed at the right moments. She had eaten the food and accepted the glass of sparkling water that was offered to her in place of wine, a detail she made sure at least 3 people noticed. Then, somewhere around the gift opening portion of the afternoon, the temperature in Carla's demeanour shifted. It started with a chair. She stood up from her seat and moved to a different one closer to the centre of the room, closer to where Maya was sitting. She didn't ask. She just moved, and the repositioning meant she was now visible in almost every photograph being taken. I watched her do it, and I thought, there it is. And she began sighing. Not loudly, not performatively, but consistently. Small, controlled exhalations that were just audible enough to the people sitting nearest her. Maya's aunt asked if she was all right. Carla smiled bravely and said she was fine, just a little tired. You know how it is. The aunt nodded sympathetically. Maya's mother noticed. She came over to Carla and crouched beside her chair and asked quietly if she needed anything. Carla put her hand on her stomach, the same flat-palmed gesture from the Sunday lunch 2 months ago, and said she had been having some cramping and she was trying not to worry about it, but it was hard to focus. Maya's mother stood up. Her voice, when she spoke next, was loud enough to carry. Everyone, I'm sorry Carla isn't feeling well. Can we just take a moment? The gift opening stopped. 25 heads turned. Maya, who had been holding up a small knitted blanket someone had made by hand, lowered it slowly. The room's attention, which had been entirely and rightfully on her, pivoted. Carla said, No, please don't stop. This is Maya's day. I'm fine. I just need a minute. Which is, of course, the sentence specifically designed to make everyone stop and not be fine with continuing. I watched Maya's face. She was concerned. She was already halfway out of her chair. She would have handed that entire afternoon over to her sister without a second thought, because that was who she was. I put my hand on Maya's shoulder gently and said, Stay. I'll check on her. I walked over to Carla. I crouched down the way Maya's mother had, so we were at eye level. I said quietly enough that only she could hear me, Carla, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know. She looked at me. I said, I know about the receipt from the theatrical supply shop. I know the clinic you named has had no equipment issues this autumn. I know what you told Bex in September. I have all of it. Right now, in this room, you can choose how this goes. You can stand up, say you are feeling better, and let Maya have her afternoon. Or I can show everyone what I have. Your choice. You have about 30 seconds. Carla's face did something complicated. The brave smile layer dropped first. Underneath it was something I hadn't expected. Not guilt exactly, but a kind of startled recognition. Like someone who has been playing a game and has just realized the other player has been watching the whole time. She said very quietly, You wouldn't do that here. I said, I would do it anywhere that protects my wife. You know that's true. 30 seconds is a long time when you're holding it. Carla stood up. She smoothed her dress. She turned to the room with a smile that was slightly too wide and said she was feeling much better. It had passed. Sorry for the interruption. Please carry on. She walked to the back of the room and sat down in a chair near the wall, and she stayed there, quiet, for the rest of the gift opening. Maya got her afternoon back. She held up the hand-knitted blanket again. The room laughed and cheered. Someone brought out the cake, and it had tiny green footprints on it, and Maya covered her mouth with both hands when she saw it. I stood at the back of the room and I watched my wife be happy, but I knew that the afternoon was not the end of it. It was only the pause. The conversation happened 2 days later. I had asked Maya's parents to come to our house. I had told them I needed to share something important, and that I needed them to hear it before anyone else did, and that I was sorry in advance for how it would land. Maya sat beside me on the couch. I had told her the night before. That conversation had been long and it had been hard, and Maya had cycled through disbelief, and then a quiet, devastated kind of recognition, and then a long silence, and then, finally, a steadiness that I think came from the same place her steadiness always came from. She had already survived harder things than this. I laid everything out for Maya's parents on the coffee table. The receipt from the theatrical supply shop, the printed screenshot of Carla's conversation with Bex, the note I had written down about the clinic call, with the date and the name of the receptionist. I walked them through it in order, without editorializing, without raising my voice. I presented it the way you present something that doesn't need to be performed, because it is already sufficient on its own. Maya's mother went very still about halfway through. Her husband put his hand over hers. When I finished, there was silence. Maya's father asked, "How long have you known?" I said, "Fully certain, about 3 weeks. Suspicious? Since November?" He nodded slowly. Maya's mother asked, in a voice that was almost a whisper, "And the pregnancy? There was never—" "No," I said. "There was never a pregnancy." Another silence. Maya's mother looked at Maya. Maya looked back at her. Something passed between them that I don't have words for, and that wasn't mine to interpret. Carla was called. She came over that evening. She walked in the door and she saw the four of us, and she saw the papers on the coffee table, and she stood in the doorway for a moment before she came inside. I will not describe that conversation in full, because parts of it belonged to Maya and her family in a way that I was only present for, not central to. What I will say is that Carla did not confess cleanly. She tried denial first, then a version of the story in which she had believed she was pregnant, and then lost it very early and hadn't known how to tell anyone. She moved through that version for about 10 minutes before Maya's father asked her, in a very quiet voice, to explain the receipt dated 2 weeks before her announcement. Carla cried. Real tears, I think, though by that point my ability to distinguish between Carla's real and performed emotions had become unreliable in both directions. She said she hadn't meant for it to go this far. She said she had felt invisible. She said watching Maya get everything she had always wanted had made her feel like she was disappearing. I believed that last part. I think it was the most honest thing she said all evening. It didn't change what she had done, but I believed it. Maya's mother did not hug Carla that night. That was the thing I noticed most. She sat across the room and she listened, and when Carla had finished, she said very carefully that she needed time. She said she loved her daughter. She said she did not know right now how to hold both of those things at once. Carla left. Maya walked her to the door. I don't know what they said to each other on the threshold. I stayed in the living room and I looked at the papers on the coffee table and I thought about the 2 years before the pregnancy and the 33 weeks of the pregnancy and the baby shower and the knitted blanket and all the small, careful things Maya had held gently because she knew what they cost. I picked up the receipt and the screenshot and I put them back in the folder I had been keeping, and I put the folder in the drawer of my desk in the spare room, the one we were about to convert into a nursery, the one painted sage green. I left it there. I didn't need it anymore. The weeks after that were a particular kind of quiet. Carla did not come to Christmas. That was a decision Maya's parents made and communicated to Carla privately, and I was not part of that conversation. The family group chat, which had once been full of Carla's daily updates, went back to nursery photos and baby name debates. Nobody remarked on the change. Everyone felt it. There was a family dinner in January that Carla attended, at which she was subdued and careful and did not once redirect the conversation toward herself. I don't know if that was genuine change or just a recalibration of strategy. I didn't spend much time thinking about it. What I spent my time thinking about was the nursery. I finished assembling the second piece of furniture, a changing table, on a Thursday evening in late January while Maya sat in the rocking chair we had put in the corner and read aloud from a book about infant sleep schedules. She said the book was contradicting itself. I said that sounded about right. She laughed. The lamp in the corner made the sage green walls look warm, almost golden. Our daughter was born on the 14th of February, which sounds like a detail from a greeting card, but was simply what happened. She came into the world at 6:47 in the morning, and she was small and loud and perfect. And she looked at me with an expression of complete outrage that I found deeply relatable. I held her in the hospital room while Maya slept. The room was quiet. The light outside was the pale grey blue of early morning. I sat in the chair beside the bed, and I held this small person who had no idea what any of the preceding months had contained, and I thought about all the ways people find to make themselves feel real at someone else's expense. I thought about Carla, not with anger, with something closer to pity and then something closer to distance, which is its own kind of resolution. Beck sent a message the week after the birth. She said she was glad things had come out the way they had. She said she had been carrying the weight of knowing for too long. I thanked her. I meant it. Maya's mother came to the hospital and held her granddaughter and cried in the way people cry when something is simply and completely good. She stayed for 2 hours. She brought food. She fussed over Maya in a way that was entirely about Maya, with no redirections, no interruptions, no one pressing a hand flat against a stomach in a doorway. Maya noticed. I saw her notice. She looked at her mother with an expression that had something relieved in it, something that had been waiting a long time to be allowed. In the months that followed, our life settled into the shape we had been building toward for 2 years. Interrupted sleep and small victories and the particular joy of watching a person learn to exist in the world. Maya went back to work part-time in April, and I adjusted my schedule to cover the mornings. We got better at the logistics. We got worse at cooking elaborate dinners and better at accepting that this was fine. Carla came to a family gathering in the spring. She brought a gift for the baby, a soft toy rabbit with a yellow bow, chosen carefully, presented without drama. She held our daughter for about 10 minutes and said she was beautiful and handed her back. She talked to Maya for a while by the kitchen window. I don't know what they talked about. I was outside with Maya's father, who was telling me about a documentary he had watched, and I was listening to him and watching the light out on the garden and feeling the specific, uncomplicated pleasure of an afternoon with nothing required of it. I don't know what Carla and Maya's relationship will look like going forward. That's between them. What I know is that it will no longer be shaped by a performance that everyone else has to accommodate. The permanent exception Carla had been running, the unspoken rule that her needs were always the emergency that superseded everyone else's ordinary happiness, that was gone. Not because I had destroyed it in a dramatic confrontation, but because it had been named. Named things lose their power to operate in the shadows. Some people asked me afterward, mostly in the vague way people do when they know something happened, but not all the details, whether I felt bad about how it had gone down, whether I wished I had handled it differently. Honestly, no. I had been patient. I had gathered evidence before I acted. I had protected Maya's shower until the last possible moment, and then I had stopped the disruption quietly, without a scene, without giving Carla the dramatic public unraveling that would have, in its own way, still been a form of attention. I had presented the evidence to the family privately, with Maya present, in a way that let them make their own decisions about what it meant. I had not blown anything up. I had simply stopped pretending I couldn't see what was in front of me. There is a difference between those two things, and I think it matters. The rabbit toy sits on the shelf in our daughter's room now, next to the hand-knitted blanket from the baby shower. I look at them sometimes when I'm doing the last check before bed, the one where you stand in the doorway and listen to the breathing and feel the particular combination of exhaustion and gratitude that is apparently just what parenting feels like. The sage-green walls are darker in the low light. The lamp in the corner is on its lowest setting. Everything is quiet. I close the door softly and I go to bed. That is the whole story. That is all of it. The part I want you to take from it, if you take anything, is not the evidence, or the confrontation, or the way Carla's face looked when she understood that I had been watching the whole time. The part I want you to take is Maya in the hospital room, asleep, with our daughter on my chest, in a quiet that belonged entirely to us. We built that quiet. We protected it. It cost us something. It was worth every bit of the cost.